in case you were worried about how the Chicago Bears fan base was going to react and receive the news that, yes, in fact, it is official, Caleb Williams is their franchise quarterback. The number 1 overall pick last night broke the Fanatics record for draft night merchandise sales for any draft pick in any sport. The previous record holder, you can guess, Caitlin Clark, who set the bar last week, and as soon as the Bears announced that Williams was going to be wearing number 18, sales shot through the roof. George Papa Bear Hallis drafted Sid Luckman with the number 2 pick. This was 1939. Then there was of course, the 85 season with the Chicago Bears, led by the Bears defense. And now maybe, just maybe, they have the quarterback to take them back to the promised land. It was 85 years ago, tying in the 85 season, when Hallis drafted Luckman. And 85 years later, his daughter, 101-year-old Virginia McCaskey, owns the franchise that just selected Caleb Williams, number 1 overall. The Bears get the accolade for one of my best from last night. Best and worst. Best in the draft. I'm leading off with the franchise that led off the 2024 NFL draft. It was all about offense last night. 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. You guys know by now the record, tying what was in 1983. More on that in a moment. I thought Chicago got it right. The Bears get Caleb Williams. Then they stick and pick, and they pair him with Rome Odunze, who has become close friends with Caleb Williams throughout this entire draft process. They've talked about playing together. Now they get to. And Caleb Williams has been set up to succeed this season. It's rare that you see the number 1 overall pick in the franchise compete for the playoffs. We could see it right now because they have a wide receiver room that not many teams can boast and say, yeah, we've got one better. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and now Rome Odunze. You add DeAndre Swift, who they paid handsomely in the backfield this offseason. I mean, compare that to Justin Fields, who had nothing around him whenever he was drafted a few years ago. We know how that turned out. He'll start as a backup behind Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. But the Bears have done a nice job addressing their offense and planning for what happened last night, pairing all of this with Caleb Williams. They've helped out on their offensive line. They were very deliberate with their plan this offseason. I think it's worked well. They're one of my best. The Vikings, they used their 2 picks on J.J. McCarthy, only had to move up 1 spot to draft their franchise QB, and they were able to keep their second first-round selection from last night. And they end up with the best defensive player that many had in the draft period in Dallas Turner, who many considered, hey, a great fill-in, the next coming of Daniil Hunter, who they lost to Houston. And J.J. McCarthy now is playing for, and he's playing for 2 coaches who were former NFL quarterbacks. You got Kevin O'Connell as the head coach and play caller, and Josh McCown, who also is a former NFL QB, is his quarterback coach. And the glimpse of the talent around him, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, in the backfield, Aaron Jones, an offensive line that can compete week in and week out among being the best out there. In fact, they're right there with Detroit among the best offensive lines in football. And they have, on the bookends, you have O'Neal and Darashaw protecting him whenever he makes these starts. The Vikings needed to get their next quarterback for the immediate and long-term future. And, again, they didn't have to give up much in order to find that player. And in a draft where 6 quarterbacks are selected, and you have the Denver Broncos looking like they are just shocked in the draft room that somehow, picking 12th, they end up with Bo Nix. You have the Vikings, who sat there in front of Denver and the Las Vegas Raiders, and they get the guy that many had them mocked to trade up and draft, maybe even with Arizona at number 4. They moved up 6 spots to get Dallas Turner. They've wagered and they're gambling on future drafts and picks this year to go after 2 positions that were vastly needed, drastically important for their impact this year. They got those guys. Solid options for Brian Flores on his defense now. Dallas Turner and Jonathan Grenard, who they've signed out of free agency. Arizona ran to the podium to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. They didn't take time. ESPN went straight to it. NFL Network straight to it instead of bleeding out the clock on the 10 minutes. Kyler Murray now has a wide receiver 1. Catch radius is incredible. Athleticism and agility, fantastic. And now Arizona, after getting Marvin Harrison Jr., they have 4 more picks before the 100th selection in this draft. 4 more coming this evening. They can do some damage as they reload this roster. We're about to talk with Armando, and I know he's scratching his head just like I was with Buffalo. I have Buffalo among my best because I love Ladd McConkey. And they traded down twice, and they have the opportunity with the first pick tonight to end up with maybe the best route runner, maybe the best surprising speed and quickness in Ladd McConkey. They give up the 5th-year option on him, but they actually save money on the cap. That's been their big issue. Here's why it's good for Buffalo and what they've done. So the Panthers get the 32nd pick. They draft wide receiver just as Kansas City did. But now McConkey is saving space in this way. The final pick in the first round last year made a guaranteed $12 million contract. The first pick in the second round was Will Levis. He had a $9 million contract with only $4 million guaranteed. That's a huge difference between the 32nd and the 33rd pick, with just separation of round 1 and 2 and how the CBA is written. So the Bills made 2 moves. They gained higher picks. They saved cap space, and they're still able to draft A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, or someone else. And Josh Allen desperately needs a player like that. You know, maybe it's Troy Franklin as well, but the pick should be McConkey out of Georgia. Here's my worst. Davey Hudson was in the room with us last night for the OutKick NFL Draft Watch Party. Thanks for all of those who joined myself and Clay Travis and Chad Withrow and the great crew that did a fantastic job behind the scenes making it happen for our OutKick studios here in Nashville. We were all stunned whenever Atlanta selected Michael Penix Jr., which then led the Broncos to feel like the worst as well. I'm going to tie them in here. They ended up with Bo Nix after awful decisions by both franchises, I think, for the value of the selection. I get the quarterback need, but there was no need in Atlanta. The Falcons, they just signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year deal, no trade clause, $100 million guaranteed, fully guaranteed. He's their QB1. They just drafted someone who's going to help them in week 1 of 2026 or 27. No idea why they chose to go about this. And they're pointing to Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, and prior to that, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. And the big difference there is those guys were selected late in the first round. And Green Bay is winning at a high level, and they have the luxury of drafting late in the first. Atlanta hasn't won since Matt Ryan was at quarterback. And they're finally getting out of the salary cap purgatory. And they do this. They've gone 3 or 4 straight drafts where they've selected top-tier talent on the offensive side of the football, skill positions. And now they go backup quarterback with a lot of guarantees in the top 10 for Michael Penix Jr. How about defense? How about another skill position to help Kirk Cousins? It's a stunner last night. Back to Denver. Speaking of being stunned, the Broncos, stunned that they end up with Bo Nix. If you don't believe me, go back and watch, if you can, the draft room shot. They just selected a first-round quarterback, and everyone in the room, in the draft room, they're not high-fiving, They're not laughing. They're not patting each other on the back. They're not doing anything. Their faces told the story. They're just staring straight ahead at like a monitor. Just can't believe it's real. They weren't successful in trading up. The Vikings didn't need to, but they did to get ahead of the New York Jets. And before they went on the clock, 5 quarterbacks were already selected. I mean, Bo Nix is better than Spencer Rattler or Joe Milton. I get it. There's a big drop-off there. But 12th overall, I mean, I guess so in this draft. Davey, what did you think when you saw it?
Well, really, you talk about the Michael Penix Jr. pick. That stunned me. And so that was one of those things where are we going to see other teams panic? Now, they're going to say they didn't panic with that move, and it's not a panic move because
it's like a necessity.
Yeah, it's so out of the ordinary for trying to win over these next couple of seasons. I mean, you mentioned it with all the high-powered offense. They have used 4 top 10 picks in the last 4 drafts on offensive skill. Kyle Pitts at number 4 years ago, 3 years ago, Drake London at number 8, and then they got Bijan Robinson number 8 last year, and then Michael Penix Jr. at number 8 this year. So they continue to stay up at the top, but we know that defense is problematic, and I don't think you can use a luxury pick in that situation. And I'm also just not sold on Bo Nix. I know we'll get into it a little bit later, but looking at the quarterback class here, for 6 going in the top 12, we had 6 drafted in 1983, which was the record for most quarterbacks taken in the first round. And making that comparison, it'll be interesting, but that's what this class is going to be looked at as we move forward for the next generation, really, see how these things unfold.
I'm going to get Armando's take on these 6 versus the 83 6 from the first round. But look, Marino went 27th in that draft. The 6 quarterbacks were selected in the top 12 picks last night. One of the quarterbacks that was being mentioned, Justin Herbert. Schefter reported that the Chargers took calls from the Patriots and the Vikings regarding a trade for Herbert. Now, I mean, that would have been more shocking than who the Falcons ended up drafting. Herbert then sees Harbaugh go with offensive tackle instead of wide receiver, and they choose Alt instead of Neighbors. Maybe this is simply out there because Harbaugh wants to make J.J. McCarthy feel better about himself. He feels great, by the way. He's in a great spot in Minnesota. But I guess teams truly believed Jim Harbaugh when he said J.J. McCarthy was the best quarterback in the draft. Oh, let's pick up the phone and call to see if Justin Herbert's available. That almost came across. That live report felt like a fake tweet on X. It felt like a fake post, but like Adam Schefter won or something on X, like the parody account, not like the actual Adam Schefter saying Justin Herbert was targeted by the Patriots or the Vikings last night. Also, the Raiders have Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers, with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew throwing them the football. In a run game, by the way, there's no more Josh Jacobs there. Samir White and Alexander Madison are the 2 guys in the backfield. And I'm the worst. I had, in my mock the other day, I had 4 trades in the top 10. Anyone that was hoping for chaos, it was the worst last night. Pick after pick, teams just decided to stick and pick and go with their board, and quarterbacks galore. Offensive tackles fit needs for several of these teams. Wide receiver, they didn't last long. And, man, the selected talent here just made sense. Harrison Jr. of the Cardinals. The Titans get their tackle with J.C. Latham. Quinyon Mitchell to the Eagles. The Lions end up drafting Terrion Arnold. The Cowboys trade back but still get to address their offensive line with Tyler Guyton. The blockbuster trades were a myth. And we saw one in that top 10. And it came at the very end just so the Vikings could guarantee they got their guy. Not many surprises outside of the 6 quarterbacks and 12 picks, and Michael Penix Jr. Being the big stunner in the top 10 for where he was selected in Atlanta.